My father would sit in his armchair every night, filling a bowl with popcorn to watch my stepmother's daily performances. He would smile with his mouth full whenever I stumbled. But on their wedding anniversary, I decided to prepare an unforgettable dinner. That night, the roles were reversed. Hi, my dears. How wonderful to have you here with me today. I'm Grandma Helen. I'm 72 years old, and I live here in Sweetwater, Alabama, land of tobacco and hospitality. You know, right? Here in my little corner, there's always a hot cup of coffee waiting for visitors and a warm hug for those who need it. And you, my dear ones who are watching me now, tell me here in the comments, from which little town are you watching me? And at what time of day did you find this video? Early in the morning with your coffee, after lunch, or already in the evening? I always read all the comments, and I'm so happy to know where you're from and when you take time out of your day to listen to this grandma's stories. Tell me, okay? Let's create a chain of affection here on the channel. Oh, and don't forget to hit that little like button down there and subscribe to the channel, so you don't miss any of my stories. I've experienced so much in this life, so many stories to tell. Some happy, others not so much, but all with a lesson to be learned in the end. Today, I want to share with you a memory that I've carried with me for many years. It's a heavy story, my children, but one that needs to be told. It's about a time in my childhood that marked my life forever, when I learned that sometimes justice doesn't come from where we expect it to, but from where we least imagine. It was a difficult time when I lived right here in Sweetwater, but in a very different house from this one, at a time when I was just a girl trying to survive in a family that had become a very dangerous place for me. In those days, life was very different from what it is today. I had lost my mother when I was still very young, and my father had remarried. This new woman who came into our home, well, my dear friends, she brought with her a darkness that took me years to leave behind. And my father, my father. He became a person I found very difficult to forgive. I was born right here in Sweetwater in 1953, in a mud house with a burnt cement floor, in what is now called the El Dorado neighborhood. At that time, it was just woods and a few scattered houses, very different from today. My father's name was Gersino Santos, a tall, thin man who worked growing tobacco, which has always been our city's forte, right, my dears? He would wake up before the rooster crowed and only return when the sun had already set behind the hills. My mother, may God rest her soul, was named Isabel dos Anjos Santos. She was a tiny woman, but full of energy, with brown eyes that sparkled when she smiled. She had long black hair that she always wore in a low bun, and delicate hands that worked miracles in the kitchen. The smell of her dende farofa still comes to mind when I close my eyes, mixed with the scent of lavender that she sprayed on clothes after ironing them with charcoal. It was just the three of us at home. Mom had difficulty having children, something I only understood when I grew up, and I was the only fruit that God had blessed her with. That's why she showered me with care and pampering. I remember that every morning she would comb my hair while humming a lullaby, even though I was already 8 or 9 years old. My little princess, she would call me. You are the sunshine of Mommy's house. Our house was simple, but it was a real home. It had 3 rooms, the living room, which also served as my parents' bedroom, my small bedroom with a window overlooking the backyard, and the kitchen, which was the heart of the house. Mom cooked on a wood stove, and there was always a pot of beans on the fire, a pot of white rice, and, when possible, some fried fish or a free-range chicken that we raised in the yard. In the backyard, we had a guava tree that bore sweet fruit all year round, a mango tree that I loved to climb to pick ripe mangoes, and some laying hens that provided fresh eggs for breakfast. Dad had also planted some okra and Maxix plants that Mom used to make that delicious food that only she knew how to make. My games were simple, like those of every little girl in the countryside in the 1960s. I made corn dollies, played house under the mango tree, and ran barefoot on the hard-packed yard. I had a little friend who lived next door, Adanilda, the daughter of Mr. Gumersindo, who lived 2 houses down. We spent our afternoons making up stories, playing school, pretending to cook with the clay pots her mother made. I remember that my mother always taught me household chores from an early age. "A woman has to know how to fend for herself in life," she would say, as she showed me how to season beans or fold clothes on the clothesline. She taught me how to crochet, which I still use today on my tablecloths, how to cut vegetables to the right size, and how to light the stove without burning myself. My dad was a quiet man, but loving in his own way. He would come home covered in red dirt from the tobacco field, take a bath in the backyard, and sit in the straw chair in the living room to hear the news of the day. On Saturday afternoons, he would take me to Mr. Aristides' little store to buy some coconut sweets that I loved, and from time to time he would bring me a little rag doll that the women sold at the market. But all that tranquility changed when I turned 10 in 1963. Mom started to get sick. First, it was a few headaches that she complained about in the morning. Then she started losing weight, looking pale and tired. Dad took her to the doctor in town, then in Maceo, but back then, medicine wasn't like it is today, right, kids? There were few resources for poor people like us. For a few months, I lived between taking care of Mom, helping with the housework, and trying to keep going. Mom stayed in bed most of the day, and I brought her chicken soup and lemon balm tea that our neighbor, Mrs. Quiteria, taught me how to make. "Don't be sad, my love," she would say, holding my weak hand. "Mom will be fine soon." But God had other plans. One morning in December 1963, I woke up and my mother didn't respond when I called her. She had passed away during the night, quietly, while I slept in the next room. My father cried for the first time I had ever seen him cry, the silent cry of a countryman who was not used to showing his feelings. The funeral was simple, as was the custom. All the neighbors came to help, bringing food, flowers from their gardens, and words of comfort. Donna Quiteria stayed with me while Dad accompanied the procession to the municipal cemetery. I remember the feeling of emptiness in the house, the strange silence without Mom's voice humming in the kitchen, the different smell that lingered in the air. In the months that followed, Dad and I tried to get on with our lives alone. He worked even harder to forget the pain, and I did what I could to take care of the house. At the age of 10, I learned to cook beans, wash clothes in the sink, and sweep the house and yard. The neighbors helped when they could, but each had their own family to take care of. It was during this time of mourning and adjustment that my father began to visit the home of Mrs. Clemilda, a widow who lived on the other side of town. She was about 40 years old, a large woman with a loud voice and a bossy manner. They had met at my mother's seventh-day Mass, and little by little she began to show up at our house with excuses to bring us food or check on how we were doing. At first, I even thought it was nice to have a female presence in the house again. Mrs. Clemilda brought corn cakes and coconut candy and talked to me about women's things that Dad couldn't explain. But as the months went by, I realized that she looked at me differently, as if she were measuring, evaluating, planning something. My dad's wedding to Mrs. Clemilda took place in June 1964, just 6 months after my mom had passed away. It was a simple ceremony at the registry office with no party, no joy. I was 11 years old, and I remember standing there in my blue dress, the only nice one I had, feeling that something very important was changing forever in my life. When we got home after the ceremony, Mrs. Clemilda, who was now my stepmother, looked at me and said with that smile that didn't reach her eyes, "Now we're going to be a real family, Helen, and in a family, everyone has to do their part." At the time, I didn't quite understand what she meant, but soon I would find out. In the early days, she was quite kind to me. She tidied up my little room, washed my clothes, and even braided my hair. Dad was relieved, thinking he had made the right decision. "See, my daughter, Clemilda will take good care of you. Now you have a mother again," he would say, poor man, unaware of what was to come. But it was at the end of the first week that things began to show their true colors. I remember it was a Friday night. Dad had come home from work, taken a shower, had dinner, and was sitting in his straw chair in the living room, as he always did. Clemilda came from the kitchen with a large bowl of popcorn she had just made. "Gerchino," she said to Dad, "now that we're a family, we need to establish some rules here at home. Helen needs to learn to be obedient, to respect the new situation." She placed the bowl of popcorn on Dad's lap and continued, "And you, as the man of the house, need to support me in this. Otherwise, this girl will grow up without manners." Dad just nodded, already putting the first piece of popcorn in his mouth. He had always been a man who avoided trouble, who preferred to let things slide. "It's up to you, Clemilda. You understand raising girls better than I do." That was the night it all started. Clemilda called me into the living room and stood in front of me, hands on her hips. "Helen, you need to understand that things have changed here. I'm not your mother, who used to spoil you and go easy on you. There's discipline here now." She began to list a series of rules. I had to wake up before sunrise to sweep the yard, wash the dishes from the previous night's dinner, and prepare breakfast for the two of them. During the day, in addition to going to school, I had to take care of the chickens, weed the yard, and wash clothes in the sink. At night, after dinner, I had to wash all the dishes, sweep the kitchen and the living room, and only then could I go to sleep. "And if I catch you slacking off, you'll be in trouble," she said, pointing her finger at my face. I looked at Dad, hoping he would say something, but he just kept eating his popcorn, staring at a spot on the floor. In the beginning, I tried to do everything right, thinking that if I was an obedient girl, things would get better. I woke up in the dark, lit the fire in the wood stove, swept the yard before the neighbors even woke up. At school, I arrived tired and sleepy, but I still managed to keep up with the classes. But for Clemilda, nothing I did was good enough. The popcorn was too salty or not salty enough. The rice was too soft or too hard. The yard wasn't swept properly. The clothes weren't washed properly. There was always something wrong, always a reason for her to yell at me. And when she yelled, Dad just sat in his chair, eating popcorn. The sound of him chewing mixed with her loud voice cursing at me. "Talk, talk, talk," his mouth made, while she yelled. She cursed at me with cruel and offensive words. The first time she raised her hand to me was in August of that same year. I had dropped a glass in the kitchen. It was an accident. The glass slipped out of my wet hand. She came running from the living room and without even asking what had happened, slapped me across the face so hard that I saw stars. "You clumsy girl! That glass belonged to my mother. You don't pay attention to anything you do." I fell to the floor, my face burning and my eyes filled with tears. That's when I looked at the living room and saw Dad standing there at the door with a bowl of popcorn in his hand. For a moment, I thought he was going to do something, that he was going to defend me like Mom would. But he just stood there, reached for the bowl, took a piece of popcorn, and put it in his mouth. Knock, knock, knock. Then he went back to his chair. That was the first of many nights like that. Clemilda discovered that she could do whatever she wanted with me because Dad would never interfere. She would physically punish me when something wasn't the way she wanted it. And Dad? Dad sat in his chair, eating popcorn and watching. It wasn't that he didn't see. He saw everything. It wasn't that he didn't hear. He heard every scream, every cry of mine. But he just sat there, chewing that popcorn with a noise that started giving me nightmares. One night in September, after Clemilda had beaten me because the beans had stuck to the bottom of the pan, I hid behind the living room door and watched them both. She was telling him, laughing, how she had punished me. "Did you see how stubborn the girl is, Gerchino? But don't worry, I'll take care of her. She'll learn eventually." And Dad, with that damn bowl on his lap, just nodded and kept eating. Knock, knock, knock. It was that night that I understood something terrible. For my father, it was all like listening to a radio program. It was fun, entertainment after a day's work. My pain was not a tragedy for him. It was the evening program. The months went by and things got worse. Clemilda discovered that she could wake me up in the middle of the night to do chores she made up on the spot. "Get up, lazy bones. "Go clean the bathroom, it stinks." And I would go, in my nightgown and barefoot, to scrub the bathroom floor at 2 in the morning, while I heard him eating popcorn in the living room. She started giving me less and less food, saying I was getting fat, that no one would want to marry me later. Dinner became a luxury for me. Most nights I went to bed with only what I could pinch while cooking. And when I cried, when I couldn't take it anymore, and the tears started to fall, Clemilda would make me stand in the living room in front of them until I stopped crying. Crying doesn't solve anything in life. Stop this scandal. And Dad would just sit there, chewing, looking at me as if I were an animal in a zoo. One night in December, almost a year after their wedding, Clemilda made up a story that I had stolen money from her. It wasn't true. I didn't even know where she kept her money, but she started screaming that I was a thief like my mother. Your mother was also a shameless woman. That's why she died young, from the heartbreak of having a daughter like you. When she mentioned my mother, something inside me rebelled. I looked at her angrily and said, "Don't talk about my mother. You didn't know my mother." It was the first time I had ever talked back to her. And it was also the first time she had ever really hit me, hard, punching me, pulling my hair, throwing me to the floor. I screamed and begged my dad to help me. And do you know what he did? Did he ask Clemilda to stop? Did he run to help me? No. He got up from his chair, went to the kitchen, filled the popcorn bowl again, came back to the living room, and sat down to watch better. That night, with my whole body aching, I understood that I didn't have a father. I had a man who lived in the same house as me, but who thought my suffering was entertainment. A man who turned my pain into fun, who savored every tear I shed along with that damn popcorn. And it was that same night, lying in my bed with my whole body aching, that I began to think about something that had never crossed my mind before. If they enjoyed watching so much, if they found it so entertaining to see me suffer, maybe one day I could put on a different show for them. The year 1965 arrived without hope for me. At 12 years old, I had already learned that waking up every day meant facing a new chapter in my personal hell. Clemilda had discovered that she could do anything to me, and Dad had become the loyal audience for her cruelty. The discipline sessions, as she liked to call them, became a sacred routine in our home. Every day after dinner, when Dad sat down in his straw chair with a bowl of popcorn on his lap, I knew my torture was about to begin. It was like a radio program that aired at a set time. "Helen, come here, I want to talk to you," she would say in that voice I recognized from a mile away. And I would go, because I had no choice, nowhere to run. Dad was already prepared, with fresh popcorn in his bowl, his legs crossed, waiting for the show to begin. Clemilda had a diabolical creativity for inventing reasons to punish me. If the food was good, it was because I hadn't tried hard enough. Anyone can make food like that. If it was bad, it was because I was incompetent. You can't even do something simple right. If I cried, it was because I was weak. If I didn't cry, it was because I was being cheeky. "You're just like your mother. Useless, only good for giving others trouble," she would yell as she pulled my hair. "That's why she died, from the heartbreak of having a daughter like you." Those words hurt more than any slap, more than any pinch. And Dad? Dad would chew his popcorn with that disgusting noise that echoed through the room. One night in February, she made up a story that I had broken a cup on purpose. The cup wasn't even broken. She broke it herself in front of me and said it was me. "Now you're going to pay for being a liar and a klutz." She made me kneel on the living room floor, right in front of Dad, and started slapping me on the head. "Knock, knock, knock," Dad's mouth made, in a rhythm that seemed to accompany the slaps. He didn't look away for a second. He was there, focused, like someone listening to an interesting radio soap opera. Every now and then, he would even smile, a tiny smile that appeared at the corner of his mouth when Clemilda came up with a new humiliation. The violence escalated in a way that, looking back today, haunts me. She discovered that she could hit me with a wooden spoon, pinch me until I had bruises, pull my hair until I screamed. And she also discovered that Dad not only allowed it, he enjoyed it. "Giorgino, look at the stubborn girl you gave me to raise," she would say as she tortured me. And he would reply, "You know best, Clemilda, you understand these things." And he would continue eating that damn popcorn as if he were watching a movie. In March of that year, she started a new form of torture. She would make me stand in the living room, facing them both, and recount everything I had done wrong during the day. Today, Helen took 5 minutes longer than usual to wash the dishes. Yesterday, she dropped a bean on the floor. The day before yesterday, she sighed when I asked her to sweep the yard again. I stood there trembling while she listed my every breath as if it were a crime. And Dad nodded his head in agreement, as if I really were the most terrible person in the world. Knock, knock, knock. That sound haunted me even in my dreams. But what tore me apart inside wasn't even the physical pain. It was seeing that Dad enjoyed it. It was realizing that after Clemilda finished beating me, he was in a good mood, telling her jokes, even laughing. As if my pain were a cure for his boredom. One night in April, when I was almost 13, something happened that I will never forget. Clemilda said I had looked at her funny, which I hadn't. She beat me so badly that I fell to the floor and couldn't get up right away. I lay there on the cold living room floor, my whole body aching. And do you know what Dad did? He got up from his chair, went to the kitchen, filled the popcorn bowl again, and came back. But instead of sitting in his chair, he sat on the floor too, right next to me. He wanted to get a better view of my suffering. "She's learning now, right, Clemilda?" he said, his mouth full of popcorn. "She has to learn the hard way." And he stayed there, sitting on the floor, eating and watching me cry as if I were a wounded animal he had found on the street. It was on that night that something inside me died completely. It wasn't just the hope of being saved, it was something deeper. It was the ability to feel love for that man who was supposed to protect me. Lying on the floor, watching him eat popcorn while I suffered, I understood that I was an orphan of both my father and mother. Except that my mother had died of illness, and my father had died by his own choice. The following months were a blur of pain and humiliation. Clemilda invented increasingly elaborate punishments. She made me wash the same plate 20 times in a row because it was dirty. She forced me to sweep the yard in the rain. She woke me up at dawn to clean things that weren't even dirty. And Dad? Dad bought a new, more comfortable chair so he could watch the shows better. He started buying different kinds of popcorn, sweet, salty, buttered, as if it were a movie theater and he were trying out different snacks. One afternoon in May, I was sweeping the yard when I heard the two of them talking in the kitchen. Clemilda was telling him how she had made me cry that morning, and Dad was laughing, really laughing, roaring with laughter, as if she had told the funniest joke in the world. "You're naughty, Clemilda. Where do you get these ideas?" he said between laughs. The girl must have been possessed. And the two laughed together, happy, satisfied with my misfortune. At that moment, leaning against the back wall with the broom in my hand, I made a decision that would change everything. I couldn't continue to be the victim in that story. I couldn't be their entertainment anymore. If they enjoyed watching so much, if the audience was that important, then one day I would put on a show they would never forget. I began to observe everything with new eyes. Their routine, their habits, their quirks. Dad always ate popcorn from the same bowl, always at the same time. Clemilda always seasoned things the same way. They had vices, fixed customs that I could use to my advantage. And so, at not quite 13 years old, I began to plan something that would take more than a year to execute. Because I had learned an important lesson in that house, patience. They had taught me to wait, to endure, to bear with. Now I was going to use that same patience against them. Every night, after the beatings, I would go to my bed and think. I imagined the day when the tables would turn, the day when they would be on the floor, begging, and I would be sitting in the chair, watching with the same coldness they showed me. The sound of that damn popcorn still echoed through the house every night. Knock, knock, knock. But now, instead of causing me despair, that noise began to sound different to my ears. It began to sound like a countdown. June 1966 arrived heavy, laden with a tension that I could feel in the air, like when a strong storm is about to break. I was 13 years old, and my body had started to change, to grow, which gave Clemilda even more ammunition to torture me. "Look how disgusting you're becoming," she would say, pinching my arms hard. "Who would want an ugly girl like you? You're not even good enough to work on the farm." The days were a routine of horror that I knew by heart. Waking up before sunrise, making coffee for the two of them, listening to her mean comments about my appearance, working like a slave all day, and at night, after dinner, watching my dad get ready for his show. The damn chair, the damn bowl of popcorn, that smile of anticipation he made when Clemilda started inventing reasons to punish me. But it was on one specific night, June 15th, 1966, that something happened that changed everything forever. A night that even today, when I close my eyes, I can smell every scent, hear every sound, feel every beat of my desperate heart. That afternoon, I had gone to collect the eggs from the chickens, as I always did. I counted them carefully. There were 6 eggs in the henhouse. I took all 6 to Clemilda, who was in the kitchen preparing dinner. She took the eggs, counted them in front of me, confirmed that there were 6, and told me to go sweep the yard. But when night came, at their fun time, she appeared in the living room with only 4 eggs in her hand. "Where are the other 2 eggs, you thief?" she shouted, showing the 4 to Dad. "You ate them in secret, didn't you? You glutton, you shameless girl?" "But I brought 6 eggs, Mrs. Clemilda," I tried to explain, already feeling that knot in my stomach that always came before the beatings. "You counted them yourself in front of me." "Are you calling me a liar now, you cheeky girl?" she yelled, throwing the eggs on the floor where they broke, spreading egg whites and yolks all over the room. "Look what you made me do. You wasted the food in the house." Dad was in his usual position, comfortable chair, bowl of sweet popcorn he had bought especially at the market that morning. But this time, I noticed something different about him. He was restless, anxious, like someone waiting for a special show. He was moving his legs, drumming his fingers on the side of the bowl, smiling in a way that gave me the creeps. "Clemilda," he said, and for the first time in 2 years, he spoke during one of the sessions. "I think today this girl needs a lesson she'll never forget. A real lesson." The way he said those words made me tremble. There was a bloodlust in his voice that I had never heard before. It was no longer just fun. It was something darker, more dangerous. Clemilda smiled back at him, and I saw an understanding pass between them, as if they had planned it beforehand, as if that story about the eggs was just an excuse for something bigger they had already agreed on. "You're right, my love," she said to him, using a loving tone of voice she only used when they were conspiring against me. "Thieves must be marked so they never steal again." It was when she said "marked" that I felt a different kind of terror run up my spine. She left the room and went to the kitchen. I heard the sound of the drawer being opened, the drawer where the knives were kept, and when she came back, she was holding a meat knife. A large, heavy knife that glinted in the dim light of the lamp like a ray of moonlight. That night, she threatened to hurt me in a way that made me fear for my physical integrity. My whole body began to shake. I backed up until I touched the wall, feeling the rough plaster on my back. For the first time in 2 years, it wasn't just pain I was facing. It was the real possibility of mutilation, of being scarred forever. "Mrs. Clemilda, please," I whispered, my voice thin and desperate. "I didn't take any eggs. I swear on my mother's soul in heaven." "Don't swear on your slutty mother," she yelled so loud that she must have woken up the neighbors. Her face turned red with rage, the veins in her neck bulging. Your mother was a shameless woman just like you, a lazy woman just like you. That's why God took her, to rid the world of another useless person." When she spoke of my mother that way, something inside me broke. It wasn't sadness. It was something much more dangerous. It was such pure, concentrated rage that for a moment I lost the ability to feel fear. The air in the room seemed to grow thicker, heavier. "Don't talk about my mother," I managed to say, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "You have no right to talk about her." Clemilda stopped yelling, surprised by my response. In 2 years I had never fought back, never responded. I always bowed my head, always accepted everything silently. It was when I looked at Dad that I felt a deep nausea rise from my stomach. He wasn't scared of the knife. He wasn't worried about me. On the contrary, he was leaning forward in his chair, his eyes shining with pure excitement. The bowl of popcorn trembled in his hand, such was his anticipation. "That's right, Clemilda," he said, with a sickening excitement in his voice. "Teach that cheeky girl some respect. Mark her properly, so she learns once and for all." At that moment, looking at Dad encouraging this madness, I understood a devastating truth. He wasn't just a weak man who allowed abuse. He was a sadist who fed off my suffering. They were partners in this, accomplices. He had married Clemilda not for love, but because he found in her someone who shared his thirst for cruelty. "Hold out your right hand," Clemilda ordered, advancing with the knife. "I'm going to make a nice deep mark so you'll never forget." The knife blade reflected the light from the lantern, creating sinister patterns on the wall. I could see in both their expressions the thirst to see my blood spill onto the floor. It was as if they were two vampires waiting to feed. "Hold out your hand, you wretch!" she shouted again, now closer. "No," I said, and my own voice surprised me. It came out low, but firm as a rock. Clemilda stopped in mid-step, incredulous. "What did you say?" I said no. I repeated, this time louder, clearer. "I'm not going to hold out my hand. I didn't steal any eggs, and you're not going to cut me." The silence that fell in the room was heavy as lead. Even the sound of popcorn stopped. Dad was so surprised he forgot to chew. For 2 years, I had been a rag doll in their hands. Now, suddenly, the doll was talking back. Clemilda's face turned purple with rage. "Oh, is that so?" she yelled. "Now you're bossing me around? Now you're giving orders in this house?" She raised the knife high with both arms. "I'll have to teach you the hard way then. I'll cut you all up." It was when she lunged at me that something primitive awoke inside me. 2 years of terror, of submission, of accepting everything in silence turned into an explosion of survival instinct. When I saw that knife coming down toward me, my body reacted without my mind telling it to. I dodged to the side and, with all my strength, pushed Clemilda with both hands on her chest. She stumbled backward, lost her balance, and fell heavily to the floor. Her head hit the corner of the wooden table with a sharp, terrible noise that echoed throughout the room. The knife flew away, sliding across the floor until it came to rest under my dad's chair. Clemilda lay on the floor, stunned, a blood stain beginning to appear on her forehead where she had hit it. She moaned softly, trying to get her bearings. For a moment that seemed like an eternity, I stood still, staring at her lying there. For the first time in 2 years, she was the one on the floor, vulnerable, hurt, moaning in pain. The feeling was strange. It wasn't satisfaction, it was something closer to an awakening, as if I had just discovered that monsters could bleed too. I looked at Dad, thinking that now he would react, that he would rush to help his injured wife. But what I saw shocked me even more than everything that had happened before. He remained seated in his chair, watching the whole scene with fascination. He hadn't stopped eating popcorn for a second. In fact, he was chewing with even more interest, like someone watching an unexpected twist in a play. "Get up, Clemilda," he said, without making the slightest move to help her. His voice was calm, almost bored. "Stop this nonsense. The girl just gave you a little push." Those words hit me like a bolt of lightning. He wasn't worried about her. He wasn't worried about me. For him, it was all still entertainment. If I had killed Clemilda at that moment, he would probably have continued eating popcorn and watching. It was at that moment that the last illusion I still had was completely shattered. I understood that Dad wasn't just an accomplice. He was the real monster. Clemilda was cruel, but at least she felt something. Anger, hatred, sadistic pleasure. Dad felt nothing. I was less than an animal to him. I was just a source of amusement. Clemilda moved on the floor, trying to get up. She ran her hand over her forehead and saw blood on her fingers. The wound wasn't serious, but it was bleeding enough to scare her. "You bitch!" she moaned, still a little dizzy. "Now you've done it. Now you'll see what's good for you." But something fundamental had changed in me in those few seconds. When I saw her lying there, vulnerable, bleeding, I understood a simple but revolutionary truth. They weren't gods. They were just ordinary people, flesh and blood, who could get hurt, who could feel pain, who could die. "You're not going to do anything to me," I said, and my voice came out with a coldness that surprised even me. "Because if you lay a finger on me again, I'll tell everyone in town what happens inside this house." Clemilda managed to sit up, still rubbing her wounded forehead. She laughed, but it was a nervous, uncertain laugh. "Who's going to believe a liar like you? A thief like you?" "Everyone," I replied with a conviction that came from somewhere deep inside me. "Mrs. Kiteria has already asked me 3 times why I'm always injured. The teacher at school has noticed that I've lost 10 pounds. Our neighbor Adenilda has already mentioned to her mother that she hears screams coming from this house every night. Everyone is already suspicious. They're just waiting for confirmation." For the first time, I saw real fear in Clemilda's eyes. Real fear, the kind that chills you to the bone. Because she knew I was telling the absolute truth. In a small town like Sweetwater, where everyone knows everyone else, secrets don't stay hidden forever. I looked at Dad and saw that he had stopped eating popcorn completely. The bowl was sitting on his lap, and he was watching me with an expression I had never seen before. It was no longer sadistic excitement. It was cold calculation. He was weighing the consequences, thinking about his reputation, what the neighbors would say, what his tobacco-growing friends would comment. "You don't have the courage to do that," Clemilda said, but her voice trembled like a leaf in the wind. "You don't have that kind of courage." "Yes, I do," I replied, feeling a strange strength grow inside me. "And you know why? Because you two have already taken everything I had to lose. You killed the girl I used to be. You killed my childhood. You killed my confidence. You killed my love for you. And now you'll have to live with the monster you created." The silence that followed was as heavy as a tombstone. Clemilda got up slowly, still rubbing her injured forehead. Dad kept looking at me with that calculating expression. For the first time in 2 years, they were afraid of me. "And there's one more thing," I continued, feeling the power of my words. "If anything mysterious happens to me, if I show up really hurt or sick, or if I die suddenly, I've left a letter hidden away explaining everything. A letter that goes straight to the sheriff." It was a lie. I hadn't written any letter, but they didn't know that. And the fear in both their eyes showed me that the lie was working. That night, for the first time in 2 years of hell, I went to sleep without being beaten. Clemilda and Dad stayed in the living room, whispering in low voices, planning, trying to figure out how to deal with this new version of me that had been born that night. Lying in bed, my heart still racing from the adrenaline, I understood that I had crossed a line from which there was no turning back. I was no longer the same person. The 2 years of torture had created someone different, someone tougher, colder, more dangerous. But the feeling I had was not one of relief or victory. It was one of preparation, like a wounded animal that has just discovered it has claws and knows how to use them. I had tasted power, I had tasted revenge, and I wanted more. From that night on, I began to observe everything with completely different eyes, no longer as a victim studying her tormentors, but as a predator analyzing her prey. Their every habit, every routine, every weakness became precious information. The way Dad always ate from the same bowl, at the same time, with the same types of popcorn. The way Clemilda always tasted the food before serving it, always seasoned everything the same way. They were creatures of habit, predictable, and that could be used against them. In the days that followed, the dynamics of the house changed completely. They tiptoed around me, measuring their words, avoiding provoking me too much. But I knew it was temporary. People like them don't change. They just wait for the opportunity to go back to being what they always were. And it was with that in mind that I began to form a plan. A plan that would take time to mature, that would require patience and precision. They had taught me to wait, to endure, to plan in silence. Now I was going to use those same lessons against them. Their wedding anniversary was coming up. June 20th. 2 years of marriage. 2 years of hell for me. 2 years of sadistic fun for them. Perhaps it was the perfect date to give them a birthday present they would never forget. A present that would involve Dad's favorite bowl of popcorn, Clemilda's habit of always tasting the food first, and a special visit to the shed in the back where the rat and ant poison was kept. The frightened girl had died that night of June 15th. In her place, someone was born who knew exactly what she wanted and how to get it. And what I wanted, more than anything else in the world, was to see the two of them on the floor, begging for help, while I ate popcorn and watched the show. The 5 days between my rebellion and their wedding anniversary were the most intense of my life. Every morning I woke up with a clarity of mind I had never experienced before. It was as if that night of June 15th had washed my eyes with cold water, and now I could see everything with crystal clarity. Clemilda and Dad walked around me as if walking through a minefield. They whispered to each other when they thought I wasn't listening, held secret meetings in the backyard, and looked at me sideways, trying to figure out if I really had the courage to carry out my threats. The wound on her forehead was healing, but it would leave a small scar, a mark that reminded me every day of the power I had discovered I possessed. During those days, I developed the patience of a fisherman. I watched their every move, every habit, every ritual, as if I were a scientist studying rare specimens. And the more I watched, the more my plan took shape and consistency. Dad kept to his usual routine. He woke up before sunrise, drank black coffee with brown sugar, went out to the tobacco field, and only came back when the sun was setting. But the evening, the evening was sacred to him. That was when he sat in his special chair, prepared his bowl of popcorn, and allowed himself his usual entertainment. Only now, unable to torture me openly, he was restless, frustrated, like an addict in withdrawal. Clemilda, for her part, maintained total control of the kitchen. She was the one who seasoned everything, who tasted each dish before serving, who decided what everyone ate and when. Her habit of always trying the food first had become almost obsessive. It was as if she needed to have absolute control over everything that entered that house. It was by observing this routine that the perfect plan began to form in my mind. A plan that would use their own habits against them. A plan that would be a work of art in the form of revenge. The date chosen could not be more symbolic. June 20th, 1966. Exactly 2 years since the wedding that had turned my life into hell. Clemilda was planning a special dinner for the occasion. She had bought a large chicken at the market, had set aside the best spices, and had been talking for days about how it was going to be an unforgettable celebration. "It's going to be a very special night," she said on the 18th, as she organized the ingredients in the kitchen. 2 years of marriage deserves a celebration to match. She had no idea how special that night would really be. On the morning of the 19th, when Dad left for work, I put my plan into action. First, I went to the shed in the back where the tools and pesticides were kept. At the back, on a high shelf, was what I was looking for: a small jar of rat poison, the kind the salesman had guaranteed would kill even an elephant if you used the right amount. That morning, I put away what I needed and began to watch the preparations for the special dinner. Clemilda had separated all the ingredients, and on the counter was Dad's special popcorn tin, the one he kept as a treasure for special moments. I spent the day helping with the preparations, feigning a submission I no longer felt. During the preparation, when she went out to get spices, I made an irreversible decision. When night fell, they had a happy dinner, talking about the future. Then Dad went to make his special popcorn. I offered to help, using a gentle tone I hadn't used in years. "Let me help you with the popcorn. Today is a special day." He accepted, pleased. We worked side by side preparing what would be his last popcorn. While he wasn't looking, I finalized my plan. They settled into the living room for the celebration. For 20 minutes they sat there talking and eating while I watched from a chair in the corner. Then Dad started to feel something strange. "I think that chicken was a little weird," he muttered. Soon, Clemilda also began to feel ill. The pain intensified quickly. They screamed, cried for help, begged for help. And me? I remained seated, watching with the same coldness they always showed when I was the one suffering. I calmly got up, picked up some clean popcorn that had fallen, and sat down in his special chair, where he had watched my suffering for 2 years. "Please," they begged. "Funny," I replied, chewing calmly. "I remember asking please many times, but you never stopped." That night, the tables were turned. I was the audience. The two of them writhed on the floor, begging for help, asking for forgiveness, promising that everything would change if I helped them. But their voices grew weaker, more desperate. "You know," I said, eating another piece of popcorn, "for 2 years, you were my audience. You watched every tear, every scream, every moment of pain I went through in this house. And you know what hurt me the most? It wasn't even the physical pain. It was seeing that you enjoyed it." Dad was trying to speak, but only blood came out of his mouth. Clemilda had stopped moving so much, her breathing becoming irregular. "Today," I continued, "I am the audience. Today I'm the one here, eating popcorn, watching you squirm. And you know what? I'm not feeling anything. No pleasure, no pity, no sadness, nothing. You killed any feelings I might have had for you." Their movements grew weaker and weaker, their screams turning into low moans. Life was slowly, painfully draining away, just as they had done to me for so long, only in a different way. "The difference between me and you," I said, finishing the last piece of popcorn, "is that you tortured an innocent person. I just gave you what you deserved." Clemilda took her last breath first, her eyes still open, staring at the ceiling. Dad lasted a few minutes longer, trying to say something, but the words wouldn't come out. When silence finally filled the room, I got up from my chair and looked one last time at the 2 bodies on the floor. I felt no victory. I felt no relief. I felt only emptiness, as if a very long and painful page in my life had finally been turned. I picked up a small suitcase I had prepared in secret, with some clothes and the little money I had managed to save. I left the house without looking back, walking down the dark street of Sweetwater toward the road that led out of town. I never went back. I never wanted to know what happened next, how they found the bodies, what people said. That part of my life had died with them in that room. What was born from then on was a completely different woman. A woman who knew that sometimes justice does not come from heaven or the courts. Sometimes it comes from the hands of those who have nothing left to lose. Today, at 72, living here in my little house in Sweetwater, yes, I returned to the same city where it all happened. My life is simple and peaceful. After years of living in other places, working as a maid, seamstress, cook, I decided to come back here in 1995 when I was 42 and had made peace with my past. Life taught me that running away forever doesn't solve anything. One day, you have to come back and face your ghosts head on. When I returned, the house where I lived as a child no longer existed. It had been demolished and turned into 2 smaller houses. It's as if that place of suffering had been wiped off the face of the earth. My days are now filled with good things. I wake up early, water my herb garden, and have breakfast with tapioca and coalho cheese. In the morning, I embroider my towels while listening to the radio. In the afternoon, I get visits from my grandchildren. I have 4, the children of my only daughter, who lives 2 streets away. I married a good man, Valdenier, when I was 28, but he died 10 years ago of a heart attack. He was a bricklayer, with calloused hands but a soft heart. He never raised his voice to me, never hurt me. With him, I learned that not all men are monsters, that there is true love in this world. My daughter Francisca was born when I was already 30. I raised her with all the love I never received, with all the patience they never had with me. Today, she is a teacher, has a beautiful family, and never knew the full story of my past. Some things are better taken to the grave. On Saturdays, I go to the market to sell my embroidery, sometimes making a little extra money selling baked coconut candy. On Thursdays, I attend the senior citizens group at the health center, where we exercise and talk about recipes, home remedies, and mischievous grandchildren. When I look back, I no longer feel anger. I no longer feel hatred. Those 2 got what they deserved, and I got the life I deserved. It's that simple. Justice sometimes takes time, but it always comes, one way or another. My little house has 2 bedrooms, a small living room, a kitchen, and a small yard where I grow my herbs and keep a few chickens. It's everything I need. Peace, quiet, and the clear conscience of someone who did what had to be done. My dear ones who are listening to me, if anyone out there is going through a situation similar to what I went through, if anyone is being mistreated, humiliated, or hurt by those who should protect them, I want to say one thing. You are not alone. And as impossible as it may seem, there is always a way out. I am not here advocating violence, far from it. What I did that night in June was the desperation of a girl who saw no other way out. Today, thank God, there are places to report abuse, people trained to help, laws that protect children. Seek help from local authorities in your country. Look for protection organizations, talk to teachers, trusted neighbors, relatives who can intervene. But I want you to understand one thing. I survived because I learned that we are stronger than we imagine. I learned that when we think we have hit rock bottom, we still have the strength to dig a little deeper and find a way out that we couldn't see before. During those 2 years of suffering, I often thought about giving up everything. I often thought there was no hope, that my life would always be like this. But I learned that suffering, as terrible as it may be, can teach us things about ourselves that we would never discover otherwise. I learned that I can endure much more than I imagined. I learned that I have an inner strength that even I didn't know I had. I also learned that sometimes the people who should love us are the ones who hurt us the most. And when that happens, it's not our fault. Children are not to blame for what adults do to them. If you are suffering, it's not your fault. It never was, and it never will be. I discovered that forgiving does not mean accepting what they did to us. Forgiving is freeing ourselves from the burden of hatred that only hurts us. I forgave, but I never forgot. And it was because I did not forget that I was able to protect my daughter, raise her differently, and give her the love I did not receive. I understood that life always gives us a second chance. Always. Even when we think everything is lost, even when we can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. My second chance came at age 28, when I met Valdenier. It came when my daughter was born. It came every time a grandchild ran into my arms calling Grandma. I learned that we are the ones who choose what to do with our pain. We can let it destroy us, or we can use it to become stronger, wiser, more compassionate people toward those who suffer. I chose the second option. If you are suffering now, remember, it is not forever. No matter how dark the sky, no matter how heavy the cross, a new day always dawns. There is always someone willing to help. There is always a door that can be opened. There is always a path you have not yet seen. Don't give up. Don't throw in the towel. Be patient with yourselves, but also be brave enough to seek help. Human dignity is sacred everywhere in the world, no matter the culture, no matter the country. Every human being deserves respect, deserves love, deserves a chance to be happy. And for those of you who have never been through this, but know someone who is, don't close your eyes. Don't pretend it's not your problem. Reach out, offer help, be the person I wish had appeared in my life back then. You can be the difference between someone giving up and someone finding the strength to carry on. My dear friends, before I say goodbye, I want to make a special request to those of you who watched my story until the end. If this story touched you in any way, if you believe that other people need to hear this, press that subscribe button and activate the bell right now. Not tomorrow, not later. Now. Because you know why? Because stories like mine need to be told. They need to reach those who are suffering in silence, those who think there is no way out, those who have lost hope. When you subscribe and share, you are helping these words reach those who most need to hear them. And do me a favor. Write just one word in the comments. Strength. Those who have watched this far, who understand my story, who want to be part of this chain of support and hope, just write that one word. Strength. That way I'll know that you really listened, that you really understood. Because that's what we all need sometimes, to know that we're not alone, to know that someone believes in our ability to overcome, to start over, to find happiness even after the most violent storm. Do it now, my dear ones. Don't wait another minute. Sign up, activate notifications, write strength in the comments. Be part of this family that believes that every story of pain can be transformed into a story of overcoming.